spotlighting you, spotlighting Mary, spotlighting myself. I'm gonna spotlight Marsha. Where is Claude at? Where is Claude at? There she is. I'm gonna add the spotlight. Okay, I'm gonna start then.
Recording in progress.
Okay, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, January 26th. This is a regularly scheduled select board meeting. It is 6:31. I'm Roger Arnold in Tracy Hall, the Warren location, along with the public access terminal. I'm joined remotely by everyone. Rob Gear, Mary Layton, Marsha Calloway, Claudette Brochu board members, and then Rod Francis, interim town manager, and Miranda Berkmeyer, the assistant to the town manager's office, is here too. And then, of course, the public. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion? Go ahead, Mary.
I want to make a comment first that I don't believe we received a motion sheet, so I'm just going to wing this. So
Okay.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Glad we know that motion by now. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you all. I'm going to now pull up my agenda, excuse me, but I believe the next item on it is public comment. Are there any folks who would like to make a public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay. I'm not seeing any folks looking to make a public comment. Reminder that it's *6 to unmute yourself, *9 to raise hand. All right, any select board comments? Go ahead, Marsha.
I saw on the Trails Committee that you're going to be speaking to the committee, and
yeah,
it sounded like you were talking on behalf of the board, and I didn't remember having a discussion, so I was wondering what you were going to be saying.
Yeah, so I'm mostly going to be listening rather than discussing. So I was invited on behalf of Steve Flanders, reached out on behalf of the subcommittee to invite me to the committee, and so I plan on listening. I also plan on speaking really broadly about some of the conversations we've had all year about, how we want to work with our committees more meaningfully. So I don't plan to go too dramatically off script, but thank you for noticing it. And me not mentioning it was more of a function of time. Does that help?
Yep, we'll look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah, I will. I can't promise a written report, but I can promise a future select board comment. But I think that's potentially good, if anything, I hope. Good dialogue. All right. Any other select board comments? Okay, I'm pulling up my agenda, but I believe the next one on it was the
Consent agenda.
I'm sorry?
The consent agenda.
The consent agenda. Thank you, Mary. Can I get a motion? Go ahead, Claudette.
I move to approve the consent agenda and just want to point out that Miranda just sent us the motions.
Okay, thank you. Second, Claudette's motion.
Okay, thank you. Made by Claudette, seconded by Mary. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Go ahead, Marsha.
I'd like to bring forward Doug Wilberding's request. And is this a time to bring up any sort of things that I noticed on the draft minutes?
Yes, I think it is a good time to bring up that because we're otherwise approving them.
Right. So paragraph 4 of the January 12th special meeting minutes, I think there is a typo in paragraph 4. Cheryl Lindbergh asked, there's a 4 in that in the word asked. And paragraph 5, I'm just wondering, I'm trying to remember the terms that were bandied around there. Was the petition which was circulating asking to eliminate the entire board of listers or just one lister for the position?
I believe the language was the office of the lister, which is
So all of them. And then, okay. And then the sentence beginning, Liz Bloom gave some recent history. It ends with the word auditor. And I'm wondering, again, is that the right word, or was it supposed to be professional assessor, or what's the right word?
It seems like in context that assessor is the word in auditor, but perhaps she spoke with the word auditor but meant assessor. So
maybe those need to be corrected, I think, or just clarified. That's it.
Okay. And then what would you like to share about the correspondence?
Yeah, Doug Wilberding made a request about getting information on a sort of monthly basis, which really seemed complete and actually reasonable for everybody to know about, and for the public and us, and would seem to me helpful. So
okay.
Just wanted to know if Fielding was able to do something like that and if we could do it.
I'm sure we can forward the correspondence onto Fielding via Rod. This seems
Great.
like procedure. Okay, so Miranda, were you able to make these notations for correction should the board wish to have them be corrected?
What was always done in the past? Sorry.
Yeah. No, please.
You were asking. Okay. So what has been done in the past is when people have edits to make or to suggest, then especially if they're typos, and not, not controversial,
Sure.
or a matter of, judgment, is to just send those to me in writing, and then I will, if you get those to me in advance, in time for the packet, then I put them in the packet, and then everybody has the benefit of, then you can just approve them as part of your consent agenda.
Yep.
So at a minimum, I would ask, please, to send any, just because I don't want to risk getting it wrong in my notes, because obviously it happens.
Yeah,
Will
that's
do.
great.
Okay.
And we've done that in the past, but so thank you for the reminder and the procedure. So for the purposes of this evening, would it be appropriate to say that the board agreed by consensus to make the edits to the draft meeting minutes that were in the packet that Mark Calloway suggested? Okay, so I think we're nodding, and so we'll note that in the discussion, and we shouldn't have to require a formal motion at this point. But
and I'll amend practice in the future. In the meanwhile, I have a question about the warrant on page 6 of the packet.
mm-hmm.
We have time to ask. $7,270.50 to Dan Clay for plowing in November and December. I'm just wondering if we are reliant on contracted help for this work. If so, is that going to be fixed? What are we going to be in for this extra amount?
So, Rod, are you able to speak to the particular line item regarding what appears to be contracted plowing, or should we have you get back to us on that, or have?
I can offer some information, and if the board seeks more detail, and I'm happy to follow up. But my understanding is that for many years, some of the plowing routes that the town maintains has been done by a private contractor, and this private contractor does a small amount of snow plowing for the town. And this is a long-standing arrangement, and the price is little changed. So you should expect to see invoice, the AP warrant include this? And my understanding is that it's been there in the past. I see some select board members nodding. So
go ahead, Mary. Do you want to? Claudette's nodding in affirmation. Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the issue is West Norwich, the portion that is near to Hartford. So it's just not time efficient for our guys to go way out there and do that little bit and come back. So that's why that has been that part of the arrangement anyway. I don't know if anything else has been included in that this year, because I think we were short-staffed for a while. But that West Hartford piece is the main reason.
Thank you, Mary. So in fact, the contractor that does that for us indicated to Neil Rich early before the snow season started that he was not interested in expanding his route. He was one of the people that we approached, hoping that he might be able to help us out, but he made it very clear that he was already maxed out and that's all he could do. We lent on Thetford there for a little while, and we've gone, now that we're close to fully staffed, we've gone back to being able to maintain our own routes. It's been a combination to some extent of a little bit lucky with the weather so far and getting back up to pretty close to full speed. And we also have a new truck on. We have a new truck, which has improved things as well.
Great. Any further discussions about go ahead, Rob.
On page 3 of the AP, there's a reference to a payment to Tad Richardson for IT support. Are we on a retainer with Tad, or did he actually do some work? Because we hired a new firm to do that.
Yep. Let me explain. So Tad was involved in the handoff between himself as a vendor and CCI, and this charge relates to some work that he did in that transition phase, and then he billed us very late. So I understand that he's moved house with his family and it had some other interruptions, and there was a long period of time between actually doing the work back in September and then billing us for it. So it turned up when we paid it.
Thank you.
And that's the end of that. And then to Tad, and he's happy. So
thanks for that question, Rob. Anybody else? All right. I'll call the question. All in favor of approving the agenda while noting our discussion had some meeting minute corrections. Please raise your hand.
Approving the consent agenda.
Yep. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. And then next item is an introduction to our new DPW director, which is really exciting. So I'm going to turn it over to Rod to introduce Chris Kaufman, and and then we'll in turn to him.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce Chris Kaufman, our new DPW director. Chris comes from a long and highly successful career in project management for a range of engineering firms, and has a background in stormwater management and design and other key areas of engineering activity. He's been with us, I think this is the midpoint of week 2, and has been getting up to speed very quickly. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chris to introduce himself and give you a bit of a sense of his background, and I'm sure he'll be happy to take your questions.
Great.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Rod. Yes, I've been working for quite a few years. Actually started out in the waste industry so many years ago in the late 80s, and migrated in various hats with various consulting firms, as Rod had mentioned, throughout the country, actually, working for Parsons Engineering, and worked at various Department of Defense facilities throughout the country. So I had my fair share of working at these facilities and learned quite a bit. And I also ran my own small consulting firm for a while, and ended up working for the state of Oregon as a program manager, doing emergency response and also remediation and project management for them for nearly 10 years in Portland during quite a busy time for Portland, Oregon, when a lot of development was occurring downtown along the waterfront. So that was pretty exciting. And about, I don't know, maybe 11 years ago, I moved here with my young son, who's no longer young. And surprisingly, they get older. And he's now taller than me, which is, I guess, happens. So I've been here working for various firms, as Rod had mentioned, various consulting firms, and done a lot of construction inspection work and water, wastewater type stuff. So I would say a fairly long career, and I'm excited to be a part of being my director of public works for the town of Norwich. So yeah, everybody's been really super. Feel like I've really developed some good relationships so far with the folks out there, and I'm excited about it.
Great. Well, welcome. We're really happy to have you. Do board members have any questions or comments for Chris?
Welcome.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you're letting me off easy. Good.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, Mary's got a question. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Hi, Chris, and welcome. Looking forward to your input along with we have our Article 36 task force of just trying to think of ways to be more energy efficient around town in general. And, Department of Works, it's a tougher one in some ways because you can't really have electric dump trucks or anything like that. But, if you have some ideas for how we could save energy, that would just be super, or just track, somehow tracking the, the carbon footprint of what we do and what materials we use and what machines we have, things like that. So, I'm just hoping a little bit of that could happen.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to see, just to have you on board and to have, leadership down there, and hoping for a good, positive team effort, and also for everyone down there to feel appreciated for all they do for our town, keeping the roads open and
absolutely
taking in our trash and recyclables and so forth. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, it's an important function. And I think sometimes when people, it's sort of taken for granted sometimes that the roads are going to be clear and things like that. But there are people behind those efforts, getting up early and doing those very things. And it's amazing. And I think the team so far has been, I've really encouraged teamwork, and I think it's important. And I think they've been really receptive to that. So I'm looking forward to continue to build that relationship amongst the team.
Sounds great.
And I also have to say, Rod's been really terrific to work with so far. He's been very wonderful.
That's good to hear.
I'm sorry?
That's good to hear too.
Yeah. He's absolutely really terrific to work with. I just wanted to say that because I've enjoyed it. So.
Go ahead, Miranda. Geez, Marsha.
One of those M names. It's all right.
I know. Yeah.
Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
I'm just wondering if you're doing projects, but if you like to do Excel spreadsheets or anything that keeps track of projects, we would love to see what you're keeping track of and what you're doing. That would be really helpful for us. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm pretty adept at doing that. And I'm very much open to, if you're looking to track certain activities, or you want to see some more in terms of, for myself, I'd like to move us more towards an electronic format as much as possible, because I think it's important to keep, it's a longer term record keeping. It also, as Mary had mentioned, it's a way to sort of, make our best effort environmentally. And I think, historically, it looks like a lot of things were built on paper, and the public works building is not very conducive to keeping paper in good condition. So I think it's important to try to move in that direction as much as possible. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. So.
Yes, it's exciting. Go ahead. Yeah, it's exciting that you have a strong project management background, particularly as we approved a capital improvement plan for the first time, I would say, in several years. And so as that works to become stronger and smarter and more robust, it'll become project management and all the tools of project management, would be of great service to that document. And we have a new finance director and a new, and you're new as well. And so it's really exciting energy, particularly around this idea of like documents, as Marsha was alluding to, like having that as a product is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think VTrans is going to come by tomorrow to take a visit, and that'll be really great. I know some of those folks. I've worked with them in the past, and we have a couple of projects this year that are going to be funded up in Tigertown and up at Route 32, some culvert projects, and I'm very familiar with the process there. So I'm working closely with Rita on that, and I think it'll be a good. I think the folks that are involved in that are well versed and experienced, but it's good for us to have that knowledge as well. And so I think it's going to be some good synergy. So. Yeah.
Yes, synergy. Yes. Okay. Any other folks have questions or comments other than, like, of course, we universally welcome you and glad that you're here. Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, have a good night.
Thank you. All right. We'll be seeing you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Rob, for that suggestion to introduce Chris to us. Okay. So the next is an interim town manager report. We benefited from having a whole slew of reports from department heads. Is there anything you would like to share that wasn't in these reports, Rod? Anything additional?
I actually have a question for you in terms of your preference. So I think I'm a bit off cycle. I think I've been producing interim town manager reports sometimes in the second meeting of the month, sometimes in the first, sometimes both. If you've got a preference, you don't have to even express it now. Just let me know. I didn't do one this time because I thought I did one last time. I written one. But then it feels like I've lost track of the number of meetings and I don't know which Wednesday I'm really on anymore.
Yes.
So there's that. So you can settle that however you like. That's fine.
So what we used to do, or what we had been doing for a while back when we weren't maybe meeting all the time, is we would have a monthly town manager report once a month, like as the first report of the month. And then the second meeting of the month, we would have more of a financial report focus. I think that was in part because we didn't have the benefit of a finance director, but like the financials became sort of a focus of that reporting. So I think the expectation, at least in the past, was just a monthly written report, right? And so I think if folks have anything different, I think it's to be determined. But so yeah. Mary, is that right, or do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful. Perhaps the second one is just if anything comes up.
Right.
And the first one are the basics, and the second one is maybe there's some follow-up or some additional items.
So I don't have anything terribly exciting to report except that nothing's broken and things are getting fixed, and the new assistant in the finance office is working out pretty well, and we got our new server and it's up and running-ish. There's been some glitches, and just getting around all the different workstations and making sure that they're connected to the new server so that people can access the server. It's a tedious process, and people need to be there to do that. But so that's been very time consuming this week, like all day. But it's really good. So we're one step closer to finishing the major installation of the upgrades for IT. we can talk about sort of, if you like, knock-on issues that come about when you do things like that. But we don't have to do it right now. So,
yeah. Marsha, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that email I sent about the warrant articles, just to make sure that, because I kind of lost track about where we were with the explanation of the 7, I think it was 7, 8, and 12 or something that had purpose statements. So
yes.
has that gone to the printer, and what does it say?
The town report has not gone to the town printer yet, and so the purpose statements, we've captured those purpose statements from earlier, and I can circulate those for you. We've got time to actually review those if you like. But yeah, sure. Yeah, I've got a note of that. So
yeah, I'll need them for the presentation that we're talking about anyway. So
right. Yeah, so exactly.
They'll be seen.
Yep.
Mary?
Just a question about the legislation that was passed that allows meetings to be online and the transition for committees to use that. I assume that transition is it's coming up in the middle of all the other things we have to do for town meeting and report and so forth. But, at some point it'll just need to be sorted out so committee people know what to do.
We've already sort of had a soft start. So I was the Zoom host for the DRB meeting last week, and the Planning Commission meeting the week before. And the Planning Commission meeting was on the very day that the governor signed into law the thing about, or the day before, actually, it was the law changed, but the DRB happened since then. So I posted an amended agenda and left signs at the building, and there was no public participation anyway. But moving forward, we've had emails from various committee chairs and made it clear that as long as the agenda does not identify a public space, they don't need to staff. They don't need to staff that or have somebody staff that. So moving, it's been rolled. I would say it's like a soft rollout, and I would say for the most part, people are really relieved that the awkwardness of the interim setup has gone away.
Yes.
So yeah.
I think Rod, the only other matter is that the scheduling of Zoom has happened as if it were a physical location, in the sense that you couldn't have concurrent or conflicting meetings, and it's all been coordinated through Miranda and
right.
the town manager's office. So I think the only open question is, how do we want that to continue to be coordinated? And then, what capacity do we want for our Zoom account? Like, if we've made upgrades, we could have additional accounts being used, right? And what do we want, and what instructions do we want to provide? Is the big open question. And as Mary said, it's really administrative and procedural in a time where there's a lot more consequential things that are looming, right?
Right. I think for us to sort of, if you like, take full advantage of the flexibility and the boosted Zoom account, what we'll need to do is generate instructions, probably do some training, and move forward with that. I'm pondering how many meetings we can have happening at once anyway. But we'll work that through. I think but I think in this current work phase, it's a little bit beyond us, at least this week.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And I would normally volunteer, but I'm similarly. But we'll figure it out. Okay, so thank you, Mary. Linda Cook, do you have a public comment?
Yes. The only two questions I have is it possible to do out a standard type agenda with the numbers? Because that's where sometimes I might not see a number for me to call in, but there's one there for the computer. And the other part I'm worried about is whether or not you'll do 2 meetings on the same night, so that public would have to choose which one to go through, or can there be a 5 o'clock and a 7 o'clock meeting so that both meetings could be attended?
Yes. So I think so. The first question is yes. We will make sure that a phone number is provided as a standard. So that's something we can make sure that we do, and not make any assumptions about people's preferred remote participation. So thank you. And then I think the other matter is something for Rod and Miranda to give us some insights on. Because I think I will say that committees are very frustrated by the scheduling process, but but I understand the concern that some people like to go to all the meetings. Okay, so thank you, Linda.
Right.
Anything else for the town manager report or interim town manager report and the department head reports? Go ahead, Claudia.
So I guess I'm a little unclear about how the committees are going to be scheduling. Are they going to go through Miranda? Or
yeah, I think that's the question. That's an open question, right, Rod?
Yeah, I think the challenge here is that we still have to ensure compliance with open meeting law and warnings and minutes being posted and those kinds of things. So all that stuff is in place. And on some level, we do need to track when people are scheduling meetings. We might be able to avoid the problem of only one group being able to meet at once. We can obviously do better than that now, but we still have an issue with all the other associated aspects of OML compliance. So we will have to come up with some kind of a system, I think.
Go ahead, Claudette, your follow-up.
yeah, just as a follow-up, most of the committees have set days and times that they meet. So
Right.
I guess it's the off-cycle meetings that those chairs really need to communicate with your office.
Yes, I
and
agree.
Miranda to schedule.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
And not all there's more committees than I think the childcare committee, for example, and the task force struggle to find time because our standing committees have standing meetings and they've never, are other, so yes.
There's always been some squeezing in of the newer groups, if you like. And because of, as Roger pointed out, the standing committees have standing schedules. And so it's always been a matter of trying to sandwich things in between. And then you only need something weird like a off-kilter month or something like that, where somebody misses a day or something like that, right? And so there's always something religious. There's always some kind of mismatch. It's never perfect. And there's only 7 days in a week. So and
they take their cues from the top, if I may, from us. So if we're warning special meetings and meeting frequently, why wouldn't they? So their work is just as valuable to them as our work is to us. So changing the culture of how often to meet might be helpful too. Go ahead, Marcia.
One of the things used to drive me mad when I was in my last job was scheduling things. And so I turned the tables and we had basically a calendaring system that people could use. And so I'm wondering if it would be possible to do something on our website that's like a calendar where people, the heads of committees and whoever, could post their meeting with the Zoom link. Right on our website.
Maybe
yes, we had a Google Calendar plugin for a while, right? It's I think that's a good suggestion, and perhaps it could be explored.
Yep, I think we can look at something like that. I have to say that the Google Calendar experience was pretty fraught in the end.
we used other things, but I think there's products out there.
Right. Okay. I'm happy to investigate that.
Okay, Rob.
It's also a feature of Office 365, of Microsoft 365, to coordinate team activities. So it may be that that feature is embedded in what we subscribe to.
It's true, and I think there's been some talk of getting committees' email addresses, and anyway.
Yeah, I haven't had time to explore all those features yet, but I think Rob's onto something there, so we'll have a look at that. I think it's the Teams interface which kind of drives me nuts on a different level, but I won't go into that. So there you go.
Yes, the state uses it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm still suffering.
Yeah. So this was okay. So we have advice and work for the town manager's office, and that's good. Anything else? Go ahead, Marcia.
I was looking, are we going to talk about the planning report? Because I was wondering about the draft land use regulations. I'd like to see a copy of those. And I'm wondering what agreement you're finalizing for the village and adjacent area wastewater.
So go ahead, Claudette. Do you want to?
I don't know what you're talking about, Marcia.
That's from the report.
The wastewater study. So
this is me in my capacity as the planning director, sort of the weekend job. So to give you an update on a couple of different things, so let's start with the land use regulations. So as you know from the town plan, there's a commitment to rewrite the land use regulations as an action item in the town plan. And that process has started. It started on two different levels. There's background research going on, and then there's now the review of iterations of draft language. So the background research takes two forms. Well, the first one is a so-called, the nickname for it is a density study. So it's looking at settlement patterns in Norwich from the end of the 1990s through to 2020 using GIS data and E911 data points to be able to map where new houses have been added in Norwich and establish a pattern and see whether the existing land use regulations, particularly the subdivision regulations, have promoted the kind of land use pattern that we want or not. That's underway. And then the second part of the background research is the village and adjacent area wastewater study. I mean, contract review phase with the consultant through the state. There's a program that is funding this study that you previously approved, the state revolving loan fund program. And we are at the point of having the draft contract of the engineering consulting firm being reviewed by the Department of Environmental Conservation engineer in that program. And once we're to the other side of that, I hope we've got to make an announcement as to the consultant team that's going to undertake that work. It will commence in earnest in spring with field work and community outreach, and they'll be working closely with the Planning Commission to do that. The RFQ, as you know, has been posted on the town website and in other places recently. So back to the question of the land use regulations, it's the role and the domain of the Planning Commission to develop land use regulations in draft form, bring them to a point where the Planning Commission is satisfied with them, hold public hearings, and then once it's been approved by the Planning Commission, move that work to the Selectboard. The Selectboard then holds its own public hearings and then has the opportunity to adopt, amend, or reject the land use regulations as developed by the Planning Commission. So we're in the early phases now of the language for review, and the packets from the Planning Commission have included that language for review. And so those packets are available on the website for the Planning Commission.
So they're out there, okay.
Yep.
Good.
Yep, and they've been discussed with the DRB as well at this point.
Yeah, that's why I picked it up on your report.
Right. Yep.
So that agreement is just for the study?
Yes,
For the
the agreement.
wastewater.
The agreement that I'm referencing is an agreement to be made with consultants so that they can undertake the study, and then the findings of that study will inform some questions that the Planning Commission will have to answer when they draft other sections of the land use regulations.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, and all of that work has been on schedule, which is really impressive. Thanks. Linda Cook, are you beeping because you have a public comment?
Yes, I'm wondering, how do you access those meetings to be able to listen to them?
They're on, so the Planning Commission warns meetings and you can attend them?
Mm-hmm. All this is discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, which has a Zoom link.
I think you've been to them, Linda.
And Linda, you're a regular, you're a frequent flyer there. And the DRB Zoom meetings.
No, but I understand that part. Excuse me, Rod, but how can I go and actually see and view that meeting?
You're talking about
they were recorded somewhere.
The Planning Commission meetings are recorded, and there's a delay, but they're recorded and placed on the Town of Norwich YouTube channel, which needs some kind of boosting. It's not as popular as you might expect, but I don't think we're up to 10,000 viewers yet. But they're available on our famous YouTube channel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Are we good? All right, thanks, everybody. Oh my goodness, we're getting beached today. All right, that's okay. Next item is the ordinance for the wearing of face covering. So the action is to reauthorize the mask mandate. We'll be asked to reauthorize the mandate for additional 30 days as required by law. You remember that when we put it, any ordinance that we put into play, as we did, has 45 days and then it expires and we have to reauthorize it. So we have actually lapsed slightly. And so we need to consider to take this up again. So what I would like to, maybe I'll have a general discussion a little bit about maybe any observation. Go ahead, Claudia. Do you have a suggestion on what you would like to discuss first?
I was just going to make a motion, but I needed the dates. So it's effective tonight, starting today. And what's the 30-day date? Does anybody know?
I'm looking.
23rd, 24th?
I can tell you that it's February 25. It would be through February 25.
So I move to adopt the rule requiring face coverings indoors in public spaces as included in the Selectboard meeting packet, effective January 26th, 2022 through February 25th, 2022.
I second that.
Okay, made by Claudette, seconded by Mary. Now, why don't we have our discussion, if any? Go ahead, Mary.
Well, this is just an anecdote that several days ago I was at Dan & Witt's just doing a transaction and overheard a confrontation between a cashier and someone who was not willing to wear a mask. And the person at that point said, oh, the ordinance has expired and I'm not going to wear a mask. And so, was encouraged strongly by the cashier to do it to help the community. And it was an ordinance and so forth. The person refused. And then I went in later, a few minutes, I went out and then I came back in and just chatted with the cashier again. I said, well, did you know who that was? Or do you know anything more about it? But they said, the two people come in every day to Dan & Witt's and refuse to wear masks. And I thought that was kind of crummy and not what I expect, especially of residents. And I'm not sure what to do about that. I think we're trying to give the businesses a little bit of cover, but it appears that some people, there are people that feel strongly about not wearing masks and I guess want to express their views by being unpleasant at Dan & Witt's.
Yes, thanks for sharing that, Mary. Right. Marcia?
As you know, I didn't like the language the first time around. I don't like it this time around. I do like the mask requirement, but I'm wondering what other towns have done around us. And is there any sort of benefit to looking for some consistency? And they may actually have done some things that we haven't thought of.
Go ahead, Claudette.
I know there was a suggestion, I think it was out of Thetford, that their mask, the signs be explicit to say no mask, no service. But again, there's the enforcement issue. But I'm not sure what language the other villages or the other towns are using. I think it's probably pretty consistent with what we have, but I can't say for sure.
I think ours is a little more unique. I spoke last time about, the data metrics that are in our ordinance, right? It says that the board may choose to stop the ordinance if the CDC levels go below moderate, right? So there's this implicit link to, some data-driven work, which I haven't noticed in neighboring communities. I think Hartford went back after they went back to make sure theaters were more meaningfully represented in their ordinance, because they have theaters in downtown White River. And some folks talked about how they needed signage in Norwich. And of course, we have provided some signage. So I feel pretty actually proud of the work that we've done on ours. Go ahead, Marcia.
Well, is there any benefit to trying to sort of match up with other towns so that people understand that this region has the same sort of requirements?
Rod, do you want to chime in here? Because I think you thought of that question, and then I'll let me take Mary's comment. I'm so sorry. Mary, go ahead.
Well, my gut reaction is that, people feel very strongly about not wearing masks, that kind of trying to have more nuance or either nuanced or consistent signage isn't going to make a bit of difference. I don't think it's I think there's strongly held beliefs, which you can argue in terms of science. That's the direction I like to go, and others may argue it from other point of view, but I just don't think that a consistent message or a brilliant message that can kind of persuade people is really the point. I think we've done a good job of coming up with a rational message. We've gotten it out there. I do feel, I feel pretty bad about the enforcement part, and we went into it knowing that it was pretty much impossible to enforce. I just kind of feel some empathy for the retail businesses that where people are just unpleasant about it. They don't cooperate and they're unpleasant. And I don't think anyone should have to go through that. I don't know what to do about that. Maybe if the retail people want to keep a log of who comes in and what the interactions are, something like that. That's about the only thing I could think of. Keep track of it.
Right. So, you can't enforce mask wearing, but you can enforce any sort of escalation of violence, right?
I don't think you can enforce politeness.
Right.
I really don't. If it came to someone throwing something like, think Dan Fraser said frozen peas get thrown sometimes. It's almost like comical, but if it got physical, then yes, but it's almost not even about that.
Sure. Claudette, did you have something?
I bumped myself out of the Zoom screen. So, I think just trying to coordinate with the other towns, I think at this stage of the game is probably futile, really, or not worth the effort. But if we're truly following the science, then this ordinance should probably be amended to remove, or this rule should be amended to remove cloth coverings, since that's no longer a recommendation of the CDC. So
I think that's smart.
So I don't know how people feel about Section 3 under definitions, number 1, face cloth means any cloth or tightly woven fabric. Well, we could remove the cloth language and specify, a surgical mask or KN95 or whatever. But it's the problem I have. My whole concern with all of this face mask stuff, even though I am in strong support, people don't wear them correctly.
I know you said that for years.
Yeah, which is why I guess I'm arguing that let's just leave it as it is and
yes.
Extend it for another 30 days. And it's just like, what are we going to do? Have classes on how to wear your face mask correctly?
Have pictures.
Yeah.
So, and you see it all the time, everywhere, and not just the below the nose and above the chin, but it's also the gaps on the side, and it's the fact that some of them just plain they're wearing a way too small mask. It's crazy.
Right. So let the record reflect that Claudette Brashear indicated best methods for mask wearing. So yeah, absolutely.
And as as it's been stated all along, a cloth mask is better than nothing. A surgical mask is better than a cloth mask. 2 surgical masks are better than a cloth mask. A KN95 is better than a surgical mask, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, that's great. Thank you for the
Sorry.
public service announcement. No, thank you for the public service announcement, right? So thank you. All right. Rod, do you have any, you had your hand up too.
No, I think Claudette captured it pretty well. I think at this point, I think she did a stunning job. I feel like it's given the fact that we need to get this renewed really quickly, it might not behoove us to mess with the language right now. And I think I reluctantly agree with Claudette that any mask is better than no mask. And just maintaining that message seems to be the most effective thing. I also agree it's too late in the game to really try and get some coordination going in the Upper Valley. I think we're just still going to ride this one out, at least for a while. I would say that just the other day I noticed that but the wine store and Blue Sparrow both referenced the town face covering ordinance on their signs on their doors, inviting people to work with them to adhere to our ordinance, which I actually think is really nice. And so I think we have enabled some businesses to appeal to their customers and say, look, some version of we're all in this together. So I actually appreciate those signs and think that that's a good result for us. That being said, yeah. And the only other thing is that in the face of Omicron, we've taken steps in the town to actually buy appropriate masks and offer them to staff and to people who visit, so that they've got KN95 or N95 compliant masks, because we realize that there is a superior performance provided by those masks. And so we wanted to move away from the suggestion of, we wanted to make clear that we're in this together, and we're going to provide you with the best masks that are available at a reasonable price. And I think that encouragement to wear masks properly and to wear the right kind of masks is a good, responsible gesture on the part of an employer or a public place. So it's been working fairly well so far.
Right.
Yep. So that's all.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great. And there was some delay in folks in at least one business learning or knowing of the mask ordinance, and I had written to them, and they very graciously thanked us and said they will comply. So yes, I've seen some cooperation as well as, to sort of counterbalance what Mary also has observed. They both exist. Okay, so I think we're good. Can I call the question? I'll roll call. Is that all right? Okay. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Marcia?
Because of language.
What was your vote? I'm sorry.
Abstain because of the language.
Great. Claudette, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, great. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the planning for information sessions and town meeting. Okay, so what I would like to do for this is, for the last 2 years, we've sort of worked from a very similar deck, from a similar presentation. And so I'm going to share my screen and walk through the updates that I have made to date. What I would like to do for this agenda item is I would like to have some consensus on the approach and the length. Sorry, go ahead, Claudette.
Roger, even before we get to your presentation, have we decided as a group that we will have additional information sessions and agreed on those dates?
Yes, so thank you. Taking a step back through the agenda setting process, I threw 2 dates out for availability. I think one was a weekend to acknowledge working folks. I believe that was as early as the 5th of February. Is that right? And then the other one was the evening of Valentine's Day, so we could all be each other's date. So that was the 14th. So these were the dates: the evening of the 14th, I believe, and then the February 5th, which was a weekend. So
I just wanted to clarify that, especially for the public, that yes, we would be providing those additional info sessions on the municipal part of the budget only, or the warning only.
That's right, and we would warn them as special meetings, right? Special meetings that had information rather than yes. Okay, so thank you for that. So for that helps for clarity. So the deck that I'll run through, I just want to get some consensus on sort of the approach and the length, and then after a half hour, and I want to hear what all of you think that we must include in terms of each of the slides, right, or each of the topics, or each of the conversation points, and then after 30 minutes, I would like two people to finish it up. And then what we would do, if people would want to review the final content before the actual presentation, is we would just meet. I would propose that we meet slightly in advance before we actually sort of, go through it. So we would go through it now, 2 people work on it. We do a dress rehearsal, and then the actual performance. So that's what I would propose. But we can think about that, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So you folks are seeing Keynote, is that right? Okay. So this should be a little familiar. We begin with sort of the high level agenda, right? The presentation. So I should say too that this will be used actually at town meeting, right? And it, as well. So we have the presentation of the operating budget. These are sort of the three components that we would discuss, and then information on articles, and these are them. And so this will be, this is a draft. So the presentation of budget, which is Article 4, we have the language. This is as we approved. And then the next slide is just literally a sentence about, how it is that how we directed town staff. Very simply, we requested a level service operating budget for the coming year, and it reflects a commitment to maintaining current services while accounting for the coming year's high inflation rate. In the past, not included in this, but in the past, I included a long sort of board budget process, but we've been mercifully spared of that this time around. And so we just go to this next screen that says that we're looking at a proposed increase of 3.72% from the previous fiscal year. This, I have to get the final data from Fielding, but it talks about what the percent increase for town operations and the allocation to reserve funds, what they increased, and then the grand total with other monetary articles considered. This is a chart that will be updated. So I'm going to linger on this because Marcia, for example, Marcia's probably hadn't seen it. So this is mostly for the benefit of a visual, but we don't necessarily break down and explain key points of it. One of the things I like to point to is that, in 2012, it looks like that there was a big move of taking things out of operation and like moving them to designated. That's what this data would support anyway. But we don't necessarily talk about any of the finer points, only to say that it's been, this has been consistent with our practices. Oddly, in 2020, when folks made cuts to the designated funds and because of the storm, operations increased in the year that these designated funds decreased. So there's some anecdotes that we can point to, but it feels like a very internalized conversation. I think folks just benefit from the high level. Go ahead, Marcia.
So what happened in 2012 when the reserve fund appropriations went up plus the operations went up?
Herb has described in the past that it was a big shift in how budgeting occurred. We moved things, but I don't actually know, and we can explain. We can find out more. But yes, go ahead, Marcia or Claudette.
I would have to go back, but I'm wondering if that's the year that we actually hired or really a Condrey report and really bumped up hugely salaries.
The salary changed.
That'd be the operations bump, though, not the designated fund one, right? You can see that. You can see the same bump in hovering over 2012 on the blue. Yeah.
So I think from a high level, so I think for the purposes of this year, it's explaining, I think that 2023 will only slightly increase. So we're seeing, I think this illustrates, right, like a sensitivity, right, towards increases, but other than that one big bump, which we may have some explaining to do back in 2012. Okay, so that's that chart. And then it jumps to the estimated tax impact. which is totally estimated, right? Because there's so many numbers we're plugging in, but I think folks ultimately like to see this information. And so it goes from, you can see on the assessed property values on the I forget what access that's called, I'm sorry. And then the cost is on the bottom, but you can read it more easily on this next slide. Go ahead, Mark.
Access, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why?
Roger, on slide 9,
Yes.
what's the local agreement?
I'm not going to try to explain it. I'm going to have Rod explain what local agreement means, if that's okay, Rod. But I think mostly it's county stuff.
Yeah, I think it references the contribution we make to the county, which is odd given the limited range of county services. But we do make a payment to the county every year, and I believe that's what that represents.
And what I will say too is what I would hope, if we are in agreement on this generally, that two people go and write a narrative, right? So that the folks, and we can either divide it amongst all of us or just have two people present it, so we could actually narrate these slides more meaningfully.
It doesn't even look like we had any local agreement costs for two of those bars.
Yeah, so it's very, you can see it's very small here.
Okay.
It takes a big jump recently because they've increased the contribution that we need to make because they want to restore the courthouse.
Mm.
Okay, so these are tax slides. This is a very transition slide that basically just says, as you know, it's a pretty, admittedly milquetoast statement that says we'll look at all of these things together as future governance. Then we go into reserve funds. So I have to look at this. So one of the things we talked about last year, or what was interest, is that the reserve fund allocations we were in the process of restoring historic budgeted levels for the reserve fund allocations. And so that was something we wanted to talk about last year. And so that's what this does. It lets you know that, in 2019, we were sort of up here and we've been slowly reclimbing. And I'm not sure where we necessarily ended up this year, if it's a slight increase, but we may or may not want to share this with the voters.
I think we should share it, but
Me too.
Okay. And then this is, we sort of end here, I won't show, where is it? The real slide. I won't show them this slide, but this hasn't been updated with the latest data, but it previously makes the point that, it's, you're paying towards the education fund more than anything else. But in lieu of this slide, which is not generous to our school board colleagues, we have this slide, which just sort of acknowledges that we work in a greater picture. Yes. Yes.
I actually don't see anything wrong with the pie chart, but this says the same thing. Except maybe metaphor pie, is so food related. People get sensitive about it, but
I would include the pie chart. I think it's important. It is what it is.
Yeah, it may be a different pie this year too.
It's a little not generous because it's talking about the money that goes to the state education fund, which is not necessarily the money that is, returned to the school that we have. So we would be required to explain something that's less in our purview, which is why I keep this as an internal note for us.
I think it's good information for the public. I don't think we have to keep information secret.
we would just have to be prepared to explain the information. And is it appropriate for us to be discussing the state education fund and the mechanisms for school financing?
Well, it's all part of what people have to pay. It's all part of the governance of our state. So I don't see why not.
Okay.
I agree. I mean, we don't have to say we understand how it's done, but there's a bottom line and there it is, or it's going to be.
Okay.
And we're responsible for the collection, so.
Claudette, you raised your hand, I see.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to. I would be happy to show this chart, but I'm, like you said, Roger, I am absolutely not willing to speak to how the education fund or how the school budget is funded by the education fund, and it may all change. And I think the school board is going to have enough of an issue explaining their 13% increase and minus the bond votes.
And I think, and so I think this chart, says the point that we wish to make, which is just we are cognizant of a wider burden, or I guess. So
yeah,
I'll update all the slides, but.
But I do think it's important for the voters to. Actually, I take that back, because I would probably leave it in, because I do not believe that the school board is planning anything other than the formal information session on the Monday before town meeting. So it might be helpful for the voters to see it. I could go either way.
Okay, so I'll try to update the data. I don't think I updated it last year. Go ahead. I'm keen on dropping the pie chart and keeping this, but we'll see. So let me take a break and stop talking and ask you any questions about any of the charts or the high level information that's been presented in terms of the FY23 budget. Any comments, edits, or suggestions on a high level? Go ahead, Claudette.
I think it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, you can see here in the past, we talked about budget priorities, and we talked about, actually, no, maybe I already deleted them out. I deleted them out, but we had longer explanations for what made the budget unique. But I think the best explanation for this budget is a level service operating budget. So
I think people like the sound of that. And, you could say a little bit, just what a crazy year it's been with COVID and the economy and workers and inflation, but you don't have to. You don't have to over-explain it.
Okay, and then what about this bit about the reserve funds? We would be talking about an attempt since the 2020 and 2021 budget cycles to restore these. And do we want to continue to talk about that? I mean, this is pretty wild, this chart in general, I would say. Go ahead, put it.
I guess I would, if anything, if we leave it in there, and I don't know where we're going to be for 2023, but we can certainly point out that with our new department heads, this may change. The changes, we don't know what will happen or what will be proposed for fiscal year 24. So if it shows a slight decrease, it's because we are trying to maintain a budget that's flat related to services, but acknowledging the impact of inflation.
Sure.
And until we had those new department directors on board, we really won't know what they will bring forward for proposed reserve fund allocations for fiscal year 24.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Marcia.
I think it's important that people sort of have some reference point that we talk about, because the warrant is talking about moving some money into reserve funds. And
Sure.
It's just an explanation of, you know, if we haven't spent certain monies and we want to move those monies to do this work for the town, that's what this is keeping track of. And it's all an improvement.
Sure. Go ahead, Mary.
If there are article passes for the emergency fund, then this graph may look even more crazy next year.
Right.
It may go way up. But, you know, I don't think that just because the graph is all over the place that we should hide it. I think this is what has happened. It's history, and, you know, maybe it just needs to be explained what happened. You know, like holding it close to your vest because people won't understand it. I don't think that's right.
Yes.
But also that when, you know, if you update this, or maybe it would be updated next year, if the article passes, it will continue to look strange. And it may be too that early on, you know, nobody wanted to spend on anything. We had, was it at least 10 years of a highly inadequate public safety building. It was really a ranch house. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I think
Yes,
someone
and
said that already.
And I'm not suggesting, look, I made these things because I thought it would be good information to share. So I don't disagree. I obviously would like to share it, but I think for me, if we don't have a meaningful analysis, you know, it is just a fancy chart, right? So, you know, we'll work towards that in a narrative, so that way, you know, this is actually interpreted, you know, for folks. You walk them through it. That's all. And if we're not capable or wanting to do that, then my instinct is to not. That's all. Rod, do you have your hand up? Do you have any suggestions for us? This has been used in the last 2 years.
Okay. So I have a couple of suggestions. Some of them come from the world of the dark science of presenting data. And so what I'd say there is if you can put the chart back up, if you like, I might shorten the period on the y-axis for the number of years.
Okay.
So for instance, if you were to start at 2012 rather than 2010,
okay.
And then look at the scale between the x-axis and the y-axis. So the spacing between the budget numbers on the x-axis, that's pretty generous. And then because you've got a lot of years you're accounting for, that's pretty narrow. So what that gives rise to is very steep climbs and drops in the line. And so you can mess with that scale and it'll have the effect of visually flattening out that line some. So, you know, there are protocols for doing these kinds of things, and then there are just ways of doing it. If you're trying to sell something, you have to find where you're comfortable with that. So you can mess with those scales. That will change the angle of the slope. Yes. Then the next point is, I'm sure that in Keynote you can add kind of little call out boxes or labels. I would suggest that what you should show for 2017 is you could just label that as, you know, the year of the storm, right? And then a simple note saying, subsequent to that, we had to run down reserve funds to pay for damages until FEMA reimbursed. And then you'll see a really huge climb in this line because you're going to move effectively $650,000 or whatever $1,000, a lot out of the
Right.
undesignated reserve balance and place it in a special reserve fund called the Unanticipated Expenses and Emergency Reserve Fund. And so it will spike. And then you can just label that as, the change that you're asking people to vote for, which is a changing in accounting practices that will explain the change of this in the slope.
So Rod, would you suggest, so what I'm hearing is leave this, so this chart is appropriate maybe for the place in the presentation that we're at, but we could bring back this chart and potentially come back to this at the end of the reserve fund conversation. Like
Sure.
We could forecast FY24
Yes, we
bit.
could. Yep, we could. And then I think that if you would explain to the voters the purpose behind, those changes, I don't think they're particularly controversial in it, but it will help them understand the change in direction of that line. And so, you budget for things and then you have to deal with things that you didn't budget for. This line represents that perfectly.
Right. Okay. Marcia, did you have thoughts?
Yeah. I don't see the benefit of trying to make this a flatter line. I think this curve is a learning curve, and it shows how we have been trying to get a handle on using reserve funds. And it should also show that we're thoughtful about how much money we're reserving for things. So to me, it's a positive thing if we are managing how much money we're asking for to put away for projects. If we didn't need to ask for anything or as much in 2020 or 2021, okay, fine. There's nothing that says we have to keep at a certain level. It's responsible, and I think I can't see why we would cut off at an arbitrary point if we started keeping track of this in 2010. I think better to show that we're not just asking for a flat line of money. We're actually looking at what needs to happen and trying to budget for it.
So, I think, this is so fascinating as we begin to, as non-data, I'm certainly not a data person, so to speak, right? So it's interesting to talk about how we use it. I will say that I don't necessarily know if we began tracking anything in 2010. This was simply, I created this from a spreadsheet that Herb had, right? To put it in, blunt terms. So, this idea of, do you use all the historical data that you have, or do you use what you have that you can most explain or have a thoughtful narrative for? I think that's just, again, obviously that's what we're discussing, but I'll just say that, yes, this is what was tracked by someone else. Go ahead, Marcia.
And I think Rod's got a good idea with putting those little, hidden pockets so that we can just quickly point to it. And there's the explanation. This happened in that year.
Okay, cool. And I like this. Mary, thank you, Mary, for getting us to this idea that things will jump if
Oh yeah, they will.
after this. So we'll do some forecasting. Okay, so any other thoughts on this? Okay, so I'm going to move. I'm sorry?
It's next weekend.
What is?
The first one.
The first one of what?
The first presentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we'll get back to what I think are next steps, right? But let's move on to the next half of the presentation, which is the articles. So, okay, so Article 7 is the Unanticipated Expenses and Emergency Reserve Fund. I will have the purpose statement in here next. For Article 7, I have these visual drawings from Rod.
Sorry, can you go back to Article 7?
Yes.
So is that what's appearing on the warrant, or is it going to have the purpose statement on the warrant?
The purpose statement is not going to be on the warrant. It's going to be in the town report as we discussed.
Oh, I thought Rod said something different when I asked the question.
What was your question? Just let's go back a little.
The question was for articles, I think it was 7, 8, and 12. Would the purpose be included on the warrant? What I'm worried about is some problem with people not getting the report or something.
So I definitely think, so I'm going to turn to other board members on this, because my clear memory was that I didn't want it to appear anyway. I just said it would be governed by a purpose statement, but there was consensus for having it appear as suggested in the town report. And the whole reason why we're doing more information sessions is because we know the town report isn't available for early voting, but I think the consensus was to leave it as we see it here. Help me out, people.
That's how I remember it.
That's as well as I.
So
Okay.
I guess
As well as me.
The key words were succinct, or the key word was.
Right.
Just say. Always.
so here's my question.
Sure.
Should we ask JP Isabel at the Secretary of State's office, who's the expert, if it's okay on a warrant to refer to a town report?
So this was approved by our attorneys, who often these state agencies refer us to.
JP will answer these questions, though. He's good.
I'm not hearing any further discussion on that.
I'm just going to give him a call because I'm nervous about it a little bit.
Okay. Go ahead, Claudette.
I guess we talked this to death at one of our last meetings. And I guess, and I agree that it was one of the reasons why I wanted to have more information sessions. So I think the wording of the article, based on our attorney's recommendation, is how we should go, and we explain the purpose at these meetings.
And I will say, this is a problem that we created, people. All right, like we said that the intent of these reserve funds need to be more clearly signaled. We insisted. And so this is a solution to that insistence. I would say that, the article, the title is very much implicit into what it does. And the statement is not necessary. So if we insist that it is, then this is the caveat that we have to work with, because otherwise you would have, as we talked about, we would have a very, very long question that people will just get muddled in. It's not democratic. Go ahead, Claudette.
And we agreed, we passed a motion approving the warrant as it was written. Right. So to change it now would be problematic.
So, and Marcia, if I may, you were very concerned about me appearing before our Trails subcommittee, but yet I'm shocked that no board members are not concerned about you making inquiries to the Secretary of State on our warrant. Surely there is a world of difference. But
actually, I'd rather just not be in trouble by doing something, because it occurred to me after the fact that maybe it's not okay on a warrant to refer to another document. And that's all I'm worried about. So I don't think anybody should be shocked. All of our state people are there for answering questions. And I think we all have a right to do that. So rather than have us get into difficulty, and having thought of this later rather than sooner, I think maybe it's worth checking.
Right. And I think that is highly inappropriate at this juncture. Okay. So can we move on from that point and move on to the actual, the keynote? So let me bring that back up. I don't even know if I'm sharing my screen here. Okay, I'm not. Okay, here we are. So this is it. It will have the purpose statement. I could have gone back and looked at our meeting and like prepared it for you, but please allow me forbearance. I just want to copy paste. Go ahead, Mary.
I wonder if you'd want to capitalize or somehow, capitalize the name of the funds. Maybe it's too much, but otherwise it seems like it gets lost in there.
It's fine. Yeah, I avoid stylization in general so as not to introduce inconsistencies, but like I'm totally fine doing as you suggest. Okay, so what we're going to do, so I'm moving, thank you, Mary. And so for Article 7, we have these visuals. I say a statement, so we'll have a short sentence over here, just explaining what this is, should someone not have the benefit of hearing us talk, right? And they can just view it as a standalone. They'll have a short sentence there. And then they have, of course, the chart. And then Article 8 is the same thing here.
Which you could capitalize again if you feel like it. Or...
Yes, I will be sure to do that. I wrote a note, thank you.
Yeah.
And then Article 11, see, here you have it capitalized. Article 11 is Emerald Ash Borer, and then I grouped the money for it underneath it. For the Emerald Ash Borer, I reached out to Craig Lane to see if these charts that will need a caption are still relevant. They provided us in an April 2021 report an update on the Emerald Ash Borer, so we could just, with their collaboration, introduce some more detailing of the problem. This UVM extension language is a placeholder.
And just a question on that, on the map.
Yeah.
That it's an inventory of the ash trees. It's not an inventory of infected ash trees at this point, right?
That's exactly right, Mary. Which is
that's important to make that clear.
Yes, it needs a caption for sure. Go ahead, Marcia.
Could that be bigger, because it's hard to see if this is going to be a Zoom session?
Yeah, I can. I have different options that I can do.
I don't think my ash tree is on there.
It looks like sort of ash trees along the roads, the main roads, basically, right?
Yeah.
Well, they had mapped trees that were 6 inches in diameter and then 12 inches in diameter. So there's a lot of freaking ash trees. Okay, and so there's 2 things that are not on here as of now, and so the Operational Performance and Development Fund, as we know, is transferring $110,000, which we're in turn going to talk about the policing study and the additional money for additional study for the Beaver Meadow Road project. So I had some questions for Rod about how to talk about that study, because we haven't actually we indicated on December 22nd, a preference, right, for one consultant, and talked about the merits of both bids. But my question to Rod broadly was just how specific or how able are we to point to the proposal by any one consultant. So the advice was to speak more broadly about the bids we've received and the differences between them. So we can do that. And then for Beaver Meadow, I think we're most keen on describing this as a sort of phase two study that we had always believed we were to have as part of the process.
You got smart on that one. I think it might get confusing on the police RFP, though. It might be just confusing to the public. I mean, we spent a little time on it ourselves. I think we had a good discussion about it. But at town meeting, I don't know how that's going to work out.
Right. Claudette?
Yeah, I guess I don't think we need to review the RFP material or the two bids that we received. I would just say that we received two bids and we chose one. And if this is approved,
we'll move forward.
We'll move forward. Yeah.
Okay, so with all of that in mind, does anyone have any? I think the best way to represent a document where we all agree on is for me to work with Marcia on this. I don't know what others think.
Is Marcia willing to do this?
I volunteered her. Sorry.
Shrugging. I'm okay with it if you both want to work together.
Yep, I'm fine. Is that how we normally do it? Two people do this?
Yeah, actually. So I had worked on it last year with Claudette. Actually, both years with Claudette.
You don't want that experience in your corner?
I would be happy to work with Claudette on it. I just imagine that you may have some substantial edits. Do you think if you, and that's just me totally making an assumption, which maybe I shouldn't, but I'm happy to work on it with Claudette or Mary or Rob or anyone. And I don't also have to work on it. I just have all the files. So it might be easier.
I mean, the only thing I think is that if we're all going to be assigned to talk about things, then the more I know about it, the better. But I'm sure everybody else feels the same way.
And in the past, so I did one of them and then John Langate. So the one thing I will not recommend is John presented on something that Claudette and I worked on, and that was less successful.
Agreed. So I'm happy to defer to Marcia, and I think or if Marcia doesn't have the time, I would be happy to do it with Roger as well. And I appreciate that, Roger's got the files, and so it'd be great for him to be involved instead of trying to work on files that I don't know how to work with. Especially all the graphs and stuff, that would be way too time consuming.
I'll do whatever. I assume we're going to have Fielding's assistance.
I had an inquiry out to him this morning, and I will give all of this to feedback from Rod and Fielding, and of course their review to make sure I didn't type any wrong numbers. So yeah, so Marcia, do you want to work? So the person I work on, we'll have to bring it back to the full group at our dress rehearsal. So it's just whoever wants to do it with me is it.
So the dress rehearsal would be on February 5th.
So let me ask this. Does everybody want a piece of this, or do two people want to do it?
What do you mean a piece of it?
So in other words, we'll write a script and we'll assign parts for board members.
No, Roger, just as you said, the two people that are doing the work of the slide deck, I think should be the ones that are presenting the material. It was very awkward last year to have someone who wasn't familiar with the slides present. So
I presented the whole thing just at the last minute one year too.
God, yeah. Yikes.
And so I think it can be presented. It's not a lecture series on every single slide. And I think over explaining it can muddy the water. So Rob's very good advice. Keep it succinct.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
and I think, yeah.
Well, I think Marcia and I are most likely to make it a lecture series out of all of us. So
I think Claudette is better.
Uh-huh.
So Claudette, do you want to?
I'm happy to, Roger. I'm
Okay.
happy to.
You want to work on this? Okay. Is that okay, Marcia?
Mm.
Okay. I didn't mean to volunteer you for anything.
Oh, it's okay. I
Okay.
just want the best person to be doing it.
Okay. So Claudette and I were round 3. Okay.
I'll be succinct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Successful earlier, so
Yes. Linda Cook, do you have a public comment? *6. Okay, I think you lowered your hand, so thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Marcia.
So it's 11 o'clock. The show is 11 o'clock on Saturday. So we have to meet, I would think, before then.
Yes. So I think what I'm gonna, I called it a dress rehearsal. So I think we would probably warn 2 meetings. We would warn a dress rehearsal at 10:30, make it clear that it's not the shebang, that they're gonna see us like behind the curtain, right, doing it. And then we could do it on together, and then we can present like a half hour later. Or you could all sort of represent your faith in Claudette and I, and we can go straight into it at 11. And then whatever you don't like about it, you can let us know and we could fix it for the second one. And then on town meeting itself. There's a couple things we can do.
10:30.
I don't think we've had a dress rehearsal before. I'll just say that, But I mean, I think what we have had is a deck that everybody's seen, though. So there's slightly different approaches, but
it has changed with each board. As I said,
fine.
It's changed with each board.
That's right. That's
Good,
right.
I guess my concern with having a dress rehearsal at 10:30 is on the immediately prior to the information session, is if we have significant changes to be made, that's going to be a problem.
I mean, do we really expect significant changes?
I hope not too. So, I would almost suggest that, I don't know, either we have the dress rehearsal the day before, and even then it would be problematic if there are changes, or we skip the dress rehearsal and you just trust us. And if there are significant changes to be made, then we make them for the second presentation.
I think these presentations have veered towards the less controversial. I think we're presenting just a series of facts. It's numbers, right?
So what are you likely to change?
Go ahead, Go ahead, Marcia.
Is it possible to see the deck in advance with all of the final numbers? Because the only thing that I can imagine questioning is the meaning of something if it looks odd.
We would have to warn a meeting and come back together.
So you couldn't just send it out so we could see it first?
We couldn't, because it would risk convening a meeting.
Okay.
Go ahead, Claudette.
We could send it out, but you just couldn't comment on it as a group.
Right.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Having video problems here. I was just thinking that that would shorten up any, if there was something, we could talk about it quickly on earlier at 10:30 or something. But I trust you guys to get the right data and put it in the right place.
Rob, what do you think?
I'm a very trusting guy.
Yeah, I think you should just run it at 11.
Okay, so I'm hearing consensus to be succinct and trusting at 11.
Yeah, and you better be good about it. But yeah, we'll trust you. I think it would be fine. Can't imagine what you do to it that, would be so off base that we'd be upset, really. Except over explaining it.
Yes.
No?
Well, Claudette's really good at keeping me not from over explaining. So
Okay.
Go ahead.
My only concern is that in giving millions of presentations, it's, the bright people who ask the hard questions, and we just need to be able to know the answers to those. That's all I'm sort of ever concerned about.
And well, at least prior to the 28th, we have, because when it's moderated by the town moderator, we have less of the ability to comment and answer questions or go into more detail if more detail is needed. With these truly just informational sessions by the board, if we are asked some questions, we don't need to defer to the town moderator to approve responding.
And I think the most complicated one is going to be Article 7, but we had a benefit of hearing a presentation that we liked from Rod. So I plan on transcribing that and making it slightly less Australian, and we'll be good. Yeah, like Australian sounding. So I mean, I think we're okay because other people have helped us. Go ahead, Rob.
So do we have to have this presentation in a packet prior to the meeting?
We will warn it as a special
warn
meeting.
the meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. But we can reserve the materials until that time.
Yeah, we would 24 hours. So yeah. But I think we can work on it before then.
Yeah, hopefully when we warn the meeting, the packet will be ready to go. The slide deck will be ready to be included in the packet. That would be the goal, for sure.
Okay, so I think are we good on this?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Yep.
I really appreciate that. Okay, so I think the next item on the agenda will be a board review of the draft contract with town manager candidate. This is an executive. Folks, I think if folks are wondering if there will be an action after, I could anticipate whether the possibility of the board authorizing the sending of the contract for review. I think that could be a possible action, but I won't speculate. So
Can we take 5?
So we're going to do a couple things. So we're going to let the folks go. Miranda, I'll take the notes for the sessions. So we're doing that, and we'll let's go into executive and then take our 5-minute break. Is that okay?
Mm.
Okay. So is there a motion?
Yeah, I move to enter executive session to consider the appointment or employment of a public employee. It's not citing hang on. It would be under, I believe, VSA Title I, Section 313A.
Mm-hmm.
313A3, I believe.
A3, okay. So hopefully that's proper.
Second.
Okay. Go ahead, Rod. You have your hand up.
So I wasn't clear what you settled on. Did you expect to have people come do you expect to come back, or do you expect not to come back? So do you want us?
I think everyone can leave. We expect to come back from executive session. I hypothesize on a possible action made in the public, but I don't know. And so everyone can go, I would say. But certainly I was directing town staff to go, and that we will indicate the rest of the minutes. I guess.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yep, that's clear. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, so there was a motion on the table. Is there a second? I missed the second. Okay, made by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. We'll go into executive session at 8:20. I'll move folks into the waiting room.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Okay, is there a motion to enter public session?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob at 9:35. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Is there an action we would like to take?
Yes. I move that the select board send a draft contract to candidate 31 for review.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Claudette. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll send that.
I move to adjourn.
A second.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, adjourned at 9:36. Good night.
Good night.
Right.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.